Now we can get into our updated top tens. Like I mentioned before, I had that little relapse there. Purdue is my number one team going to preseason. You're bringing back Fletch and Braden Smith. That is, in my eyes, the best backcourt in the country going to next year. Really, really great job by Matt Painter to go into the portal, which he really hasn't done much of in the past, but he got some big pickups. Oscar Clough probably highlighting this transfer class. And then you bring in Omer Meyer from overseas, which I think he has a chance to really light it up this year out in West Lafayette. And of course, you have TKR, who, I mean, you literally look at this team, you're bringing back, in a sense, two All-Americans, with Braden Smith being on the first team last year and TKR being an honorable mention. I think TKR will be on an All-American team next year. And I mean, again, the continuity that they have in Purdue, it's really unique to see that all their homegrown talent of guys who have progressed from their freshman seasons to now, that class of Fletch, TKR, and Braden Smith, I think is really, really great. And I mean, as a UConn fan, of course, I want UConn to win the Natty, but if they don't, I would very much like to see Purdue win the Natty. I've told Josh I would think it'd be the storybook finish to the careers of those guys in this upcoming senior class.
Thank you on that one. I kind of have a little bit of flip. I'm choosing Houston, and this is not because of bias. This is just, once again, because of what I said before, the Final Four picks. Houston's the better team right now. The experience is there, and like I said before, Uzan is probably coming back, at least in my mind, so that just adds to the additional depth. I do have Purdue at 2, though, so pretty much the same reasoning. I think the depth is there. The experience is 100% there. Painter has been to a Natty before, so him and Sampson are kind of in very similar boats. A lot of experience, no rings, been to a Natty recently, and they can be very good rivals, I think, for this upcoming year. I would love to see a championship game between the two.
Yeah, and I mean, I have Houston as number 2 for a lot of the reasons you just said. I just go into preseason, view them as maybe just one tier below Purdue, just because I really don't feel like Houston has a complete game changer in what Purdue has in Braden Smith. Of course, you kind of need some guys to make leaps, particularly the guys who are returning. But again, Kelvin Sampson, amazing coach. You saw what he did and the culture he's built in Houston over the last few years, and especially what they did this past season. Now they have the talent. Tough to put anyone above both Purdue and Houston, but I personally have Purdue just one spot above.
Yeah, no, I can. We kind of just have the same thing flipped, which I think a lot of people are in the same boat right now. My 3, though, is kind of an interesting choice. I'm choosing Duke 3. Like I said before, once again, you can't make Duke bad. They haven't been in any bad scenarios in terms of their transfers or the players they're keeping in. I get it, Coward likely leaves, but Dominic Sarr brings in, without a doubt, at a minimum 10 points per game, by the way, if you want to go into the stat line of it. But Cameron Booth is going to be great. I do think we see an increased potential from both Evans and Caleb Foster. And then, they're not going to make a Final Four or a Natty in my mind, but winning the ACC and being Duke just kind of gives them that type of vibe. So I'm putting number 3 just to be honestly safe about things. It just feels weird to not put Duke anything lower than that, if you're going to get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. Again, I think Duke will win the ACC, and I think I have a tough time seeing them be lower than a 1 or a 2. Again, though, I just don't know if they really stack up with the rosters of some of the other teams that I have above them, and which is why I'm kind of this is where we stray away from each other. I have BYU as 3rd. Now, BYU's upside, I think, is incredible this year. You can't ignore what they've done in the transfer portal. Of course, landing Rob Bright was huge. They get a point guard to help take some of the pressure off Richie Saunders in the backcourt, who, by the way, could be an All-American this year. Richie Saunders, one of the most underrated players in the sport, might be the most underrated in the sport going to next year, potentially. But of course, it's hard to ignore what he did this past year, being the leading scorer on a BYU team that was really good and had a lottery pick in Egor Demon. But on top of that, you bring in my pick for the number 1 player in this upcoming freshman class. I know other services have him too, but AJ DeBanza, who I think his game is very comparable to Cooper Flagg's. Now, do I think he'll have the season Cooper Flagg did? No, but I think he'll be really, really good out in Provo. And of course, they landed Kadar Davis Jr., who I think is going to be really underrated. I think is already being underrated in the portal cycle in terms of best pickups by programs this year. But I mean, again, he very much fills a glue guy role. He can do a lot defensively, a lot offensively too. And he's going to be like a 4th option on this team, and I definitely think he's going to excel in that role a lot. Kei Bakita, getting him back was big. Definitely brings a new dimension or a different look than most teams being able to play a small ball 5. But But you also have Xavier Stanton coming off the bench to fill that big spot if Kevin ever goes to the bench or needs a breather. But yeah, I really do like BYU. Of course, we need to see how they play. But let me tell you, their practice film, which they've released so far, looks really, really good. And I think that starting five is going to be electric.
I can definitely get behind that. I have BYU a little bit lower, but my four though is St. John's. Obviously, I mentioned them before being a Final Four team. I see them as a one seed right now. They're likely the front runners of the Big East. I know UConn will challenge them as they always do, but this is Pitino's best team. I know I said that last year as well, but Pitino gets better every year. That's kind of how he always plays. We're probably going to see an All-American season from Zuby Ejiofor, who is the best returning player. Also, likely healthy season from Bryce Hopkins, who could be an honorable mention in that scenario. Jason Sanan, bench depth from other transfers that Pitino has brought in. It's really hard to not make that team that we saw last year better, which pretty much Pitino knows how to do. He's been in the game long enough, and he likes the portal. It definitely shows with the guys he's bringing in. I honestly think he's on almost every single transfer portal pickup he's ever had, especially at St. John's. If you're looking at guys like R.J. Lewis and Kadari Richmonds in particular, from last year at least. But in general, he really it really feels like this could be their season. I'm not that sold on them just yet, given how it didn't really work out that well last year. If they can somehow manage to get better 3-point shooting, then maybe I'm more convinced, which I think they are going to do through this transfer class. But at the same time, it's hard to not put this team in the top five. So I think 4 is a really generous, but also reasonable place.
Yeah, and I don't have St. John's very much behind. I don't have them very far behind where you have them. Again, I definitely agree. It's tough to leave them outside the top five for what Rick Pitino's done. I'll get into that once I let you guys know where I have them at. But I have Florida as 4. Of course, Boogie Flan, a lot of the stuff we talked about at the beginning of this episode draws back to the reasons why I have him as number 4. I just think they now have a top 5 backcourt in the country between Boogie and Xavier Lee, and just what they're bringing back with Tommy Howe, Ruben Chinilu, and what we think will be Alex Condon. Of course, we'll monitor that situation, give you guys an update if he does return or stays in the draft. But again, I just think that the size that they have, the length, and now the playmaking between both guards, it's going to be a lot to handle for opposing SEC teams this year. I mean, I think they're going to have a great year out in Gainesville. And I mean, they have the championship experience. Tom Golden knows what it takes to win a national championship now. And he really is kind of the analytics darling of college basketball right now. So all their pickups and everything they do, portal-wise and on the actual game floor, is all driven by analytics on top of what, basketball heads, the decisions they make. And I think it's just going to make for a really good mix of both, wits with actual play. So I think Florida's going to be really good this year. Definitely have a chance to run it back, repeat as champs. But again, I do think they do need to add a few more spots depth-wise, like I talked about at the beginning of the episode. But I think they're going to have a really good year. So I have them as number 4.
Yeah, once again, I have Florida just a little bit lower than that. My 5 is Kentucky right now. I have been convinced of Big Blue right now, mostly Jalan Love, but also the national title experience of Aberdeen and probably a breakout season from Jaden Coydens, who I really think could be a top 5 draft pick next year. He kind of had a very underrated freshman year, but that was mostly because of how limited he was at Arizona State, unfortunately, and his late season injury, if I recall. I don't know if they're going to be the number 1 team in the SEC this year. I might give it up to Florida, but this team feels very put together. Mark Pope definitely knows what's going on, and this team does have a Final Four ceiling. Definitely feels a lot better than last year, where it was kind of put together players. This feels more concise and coordinated in a way, and it's hard to not leave Kentucky off the list once again, as many of these teams I'm listing as. And 5 might be a little bit higher than most people want to say, but I'm gonna take the chance. I'm gonna put them at 5 right now, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm Kentucky, again, not very far behind where you have them either. For my 5th pick, I got St. John's. A lot of the reasons you said are the reasons why I have St. John's top 5. I love what Patino's done in the portal, but I do think they kind of missed on getting a true point guard. I know they went heavy after Xavier Lee, and I think they would have went after Ian Jackson regardless of being able to land Xavier or not. But the thing that really concerns me with St. John's is the lack of a true point guard. I talked about it, I believe, in some of the other episodes we've recorded. I mean, It's really going to come down to if Ian Jackson's able to convert himself into a true point guard, which I definitely think, you know, well, let's not overthink it here. It's Rick Pitino or Hubert Davis. Who's the better coach? It's Rick Pitino. And if anyone's going to be able to if anyone's going to be capable of converting Ian to a real point guard, then it's Rick. Thing is, it's hard to ignore Ian Jackson's 9, maybe 7% assist rate from this past season at UNC. Josan Sanon, not a great facilitator either. And Ozzie Sellers, you're bringing in to shoot the ball, and really strictly just that. Now, they did land Dylan Darling from Idaho State, and he was a dynamic player out in the Big West, I believe the conference is. Average around 20 points, 6 assists. So he's going to bring playmaking. The thing is, if I very much feel like that's kind of a backup plan if Ian Jackson doesn't work out. And one thing that worries me is Dylan Darling, of course, played at the mid-major level. You never know how guys are going to play at the high-major level until they get there and you actually see them play. He is a little bit undersized, but he is tough. He plays, he guards, so that's definitely going to help with playing for Rick Pitino and how he requires so much tenacity defensively. But again, the lack of a true point concerns me. Outside of that, I think Rick Pitino's done a really good job. Ian Jackson, really dynamic playmaker. I mean, he can break guys down off the dribble. He's going to be able to create a lot of shots and score a lot. Same thing goes with Josan Sanon. I don't think Bobby Hurley was able to tap into that guy's potential the way Rick Pitino will be able to. I think he's been great on the wing. Ozzie Sellers is going to be shooting. Between Bryce Hopkins, if he's able to stay healthy, and Zuby Ejiofor, who is my pick for Big East preseason player of the year and potential All-American, they probably had the best front court in the country, I would say, if both guys are healthy and playing at a high level. So yeah, that's pretty much why I got St. John's top 5.
You weren't far behind me. My 6 is BYU, so like I said, a little bit lower. Kind of the same reasoning, but I don't see. I like AJ DeBanza a lot. I think he's probably going to be the best, maybe second best freshman. I think Peterson gets a little bit more time and a little bit more points per game as a result than AJ, but the role he has is so well carved out, and he has great pieces around him. I'm just not so sure how Kevin Young can actually run his rotation. I get it. They went to the Sweet 16 when they really shouldn't have even made the tournament. If you're looking at them like 5-6 weeks beforehand, I think they're definitely going to be a front runner for the Big 12. They're going to compete with Houston on a regular, Texas Tech as well. Like they're definitely going to be a possible 2, maybe even 1 seed if they really run the numbers. But I think that given the other teams listed before us, the experience that they have and just the reliance on how good AJ is kind of leaves me at a 6. You know, they could definitely be a number 1 preseason team this year. I'm just not as convinced as maybe I could be. It's just time right now. If Debanza is that guy, I will regret this decision, without a doubt.
Yeah, I definitely hear you out there. I mean, how good Debanza is definitely going to determine how good BYU is as a team this year. Like I just talked about, I do not have Kentucky very far behind. Josh did. I have him as number 6. By far, one of the most talented, if not the most talented roster in the country. Just with, I mean, every guy 1 through 14 is capable of going out and going, nuclear on any given night. That's the thing that kind of concerns me with them, though, is you have so many guys who are capable of being big time players, big time rotation guys, that it worries me at some point. Some guys aren't going to play, and how happy can you keep everybody? Kentucky's payroll this year, I mean, we've heard that it could be over $20 million, and I think that probably sounds about right with what they have. Of course, a lot of Kentucky's success this year is dependent on Otega Owe's decision whether to stay in the draft or come back to school. I think he comes back to school. I don't see why he wouldn't. I don't think NBA scouts like Otega Owe all too much. So I definitely think there's no reason not to turn down another year in Lexington. We're going to be making 7 figures. But basically, I mean, their ads in the portal have been great. Probably, I mean, I don't see how they wouldn't have a top 3, probably number 1 ranked transfer class in the country. But again, it's a lot of mouths to feed. But if they're able to keep guys happy and get guys to accept roles, then they're going to be really, really good. And I probably think they are the preseason favorite to win the SEC. I personally would pick Florida, but I think the media would probably lean towards UK, Big Blue Nation. But again, I worry about the amount of cooks in the kitchen if it's going to be too much. But again, if they're able to figure things out, they're going to be really, really good. And even on paper, you can't have them any lower than top 7, I very much feel.
No, I had him at 5, so I can see your point. My 7 is actually UConn. This is honestly Lavin Karaban. I think Karaban is the most experienced player currently in college basketball. Only guy that saw two rings, only guy that really stuck around as long as he did. He's going to be entering his senior year. I honestly thought he could have left 2 years ago. He should have left last year, in my opinion. He's coming back on a completely reloaded roster. We're likely going to see breakout seasons from Stewart, Ross, Silas Damari is going to fit well, I feel. I get that St. John's is the Big East front runner, but I think UConn is a great runner-up or a great competition in general. And it's hard, once again, it's very hard to keep just any UConn team ever off the board from the top 10, especially in the era we're in right now. Dan Hurley is not letting up last season. He does not want to be another footnote on the UConn scale for him. He wants that natty. He wants to have what he thought should have been a three-peat. And I think being out for revenge is going to definitely motivate him. And it's going to motivate this team to really get back into the running. I honestly think 7 is a pretty reasonable place to put them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I also have UConn at 7 for a lot of the reasons you just said. I definitely think Dan Hurley addressed portal needs great this offseason. I mean, I think the number one need was to get a legit starting caliber point guard with the majority of your NIL budget for the transfer portal to allocate to. And I think Silas Demery Jr. was the perfect guy to get. He's 6'5", kind of fits that Tristan Newton frame that you want for a Dan Hurley point guard, where he's going to be able to back guys down 3-point line, execute their offense a lot smoother than what we saw this past year. I think retention was probably the second biggest thing for UConn this offseason, maybe the first, honestly. You were able to bring back Solo Ball, Terrace Reed Jr., keep Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross, who a lot of people thought could be entering the portal. I think we're going to see hopefully a big leap from Jalen Stewart this year, who I think will be in a starting role. And I love what they've added depth-wise, getting guys like Malachi Smith, who were willing to come in and probably accept a bench role, turn down starting jobs elsewhere, probably bigger bags in NIL money. You get guys like that. You have a pretty solid freshman class coming in with the likes of Braylon Mullins, Eric Ryba, who will be backing up Terrace Reed at the 5. And Terrace Reed, who has a chance to, I think, give Zuby Ejiofor a run-in for Big East Player of the Year, along with Solo Ball, too. So, yeah, and I mean, a lot of UConn season is going to be pending on guys making leaps. But, again, I think they've really addressed their needs in the portal great this offseason, and getting guys back was huge, like Caravan, who probably is the best winner in the sport right now, and to have him stay 4 years in college is really incredible. But yeah, that's why I have UConn at 7.
Yeah, I can, like I said, Florida, the same thing too.
Right.
8 is Florida for me, a little bit bumped down for pretty much the same reason why I had BYU a lower than Kanaye's. I think that once again, the experience we're getting from bringing in Bland and Thomas Howe coming back, I will say this is made with the assumption Conan does not come back. I personally don't see it happening, but there is still a very good window. But I leave him a little bit lower, mostly because I'm not so sure how Xavier Lee turns out. He looks great. He's been in the mid-major bubble for a little bit too long. I think if he had experience earlier on in his career, then maybe that helps. But this is his first real scenario being in a power conference. Obviously, Florida was honestly an interesting choice. The SEC, as I've said before, was probably the best conference that he could fit in as a mid-major transfer. But I don't know where he fits. Is he the number 1 option? Is he the 2, the 3? If Condon comes back, where does he play? There's too many questions on his line of things that makes me think that although Florida can definitely be a returnee to the Final Four or a back-to-back type of team, there are too many questions right now for me to leave them any higher. So 8 is the most respectable place as of right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely hear you out with the concerns about Xavier Lee. I mean, I also share those concerns too. At my number 8 spot, I got Duke. For a lot of the reasons that we talked about when we discussed Dami Sarr committing to Duke. Again, this roster just head to toe doesn't scare me the way they did last year. I definitely think at the wing spot, they look really good between Sarr and Caden Boozer, or Cameron Boozer, my mistake. But just the guards worry me a little bit, and the big men, I mean, between Malik Brown, who's going to be in a bigger role, Big Pat, and just again, I really don't know how much room for growth there really is with Caleb Foster anymore. Caden Boozer, again, we kind of got to wait and see how he does to really know how good of a player he is. Same thing with Isaiah Evans. How much can he really grow from just being strictly a three-point shooter this past year? If he can improve and be more of a combo guard type of guy, then I think that's going to be really important. But again, they're too talented to leave out your top 10. And they're, like I mentioned, I don't see them being any lower than a 1 or a 2 seed. they probably do end up winning the ACC this year.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing as you said before. I
Right.
do like how we had a ton of teams that we've like flip flopped around. Like you have Florida higher, I have Duke higher, and
Right.
we've kind of merged in between, which I think is a pretty fair choice. My nine is Arkansas, by the way. I think once again, this is regardless of the Carter Knox and Ado Thero decision. Technically, they are considering coming back. I think both of them get drafted, but regardless of that matter, I think Cal is producing his best team in Arkansas right now. I get it. Last year was more of a Fox good machine that they were creating. It didn't really work out, but they did make the Sweet 16. Arguably could have made an Elite Eight, and who knows from there. But I think Cal's experience at producing is good. The freshman talent he's bringing in is once again, and as is always, great. But the stuff he's building around the team is pretty good. Do I think they can win the SEC as of right now? Probably not. I don't know if they have a ceiling above an Elite Eight, if I'm not going to lie. I do think if one of Carter Knox or Duke do come back, then maybe we have talks about in Arkansas at Final Four and Natty perhaps. But this team is underrated as of right now, and I think that Cal is starting to get things pieced together out in Fayette.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I have Arkansas as one of the teams just outside my top 10. I think they're going to have a better year in the regular season than what they did this year. I think DJ Wagner will finally kind of come into his own and really
Yeah,
break out
he's
the
the
way
rookie that
that,
I would expect.
yeah, I mean, I think he's going to break out the way we really thought he was going to this past season. But at my number nine spot, I have Louisville. That was the team I previously had in our last way too early top 10 as my number one team. Of course, that was before a lot of the moves in the portal and changes, guys coming back. But I still very much feel that I don't know if there's a team in the program in the country that I think had a better transfer portal than Louisville. Really, really love what they've added in the portal between Isaac McNeely, who was a 14 point per game scorer at Virginia, is going to bring a lot of defense, of course, playing for that Virginia program that thrives off their defense so much. And Conwell, I think, is arguably the best, maybe not shooter, but shot maker, if that makes sense, in this portal cycle. Just, I mean, the incredible tough shot making he brings is really, it was so fun to watch this past year at Xavier. And I mean, he did at Indiana State too. And I think he's going to fit great at Louisville. And then you're bringing a really talented top 10 guy in Mikael Brown Jr., who probably play the point. Not positive he'll start, but again, he's going to bring playmaking regardless of if he's coming off the bench or in a starting role. And then you get Adrian Woolley from Kennesaw State too, who brings definitely a different skill set. I'm really excited to see him play in a Louisville uniform for Pat Kelsey. But you also got some retention between Javon Hadley and Casey and Pryor, who Casey and Pryor was really good before he went down with the injury this past year. And I think if he comes back to form, then he could be really, really good in the front court for them this year. Same thing goes with Hadley. But I really do like how this roster stacked up for Pat Kelsey going into year two for him at Louisville. And you also got guys like James Scott and Ali Khalifa who have chances to break out as well. So I'm really excited to see Pat Kelsey in year two. I definitely think they could pose a really big threat to Duke in the ACC. I personally probably have them as number two in the ACC preseason poll. But again, they definitely have a chance to overtake Duke at some point in the season if it all works out, which I personally think it'll work out, but I don't see them overcoming Duke. But again, I think they're going to have a really big year.
Certainly. And I do have Louisville as an honorable mention. I will say the scenario has kind of decreased for me. I had Louisville a lot higher recently, or in the past, but more recently, mostly due to the Ali Khalifa ineligibility decision. I think that they've kind of been bumped down a bit, but I definitely agree with you. They're probably the number two option in the ACC and could definitely compete with Duke. And they're going to compete with Kentucky as well. That's going to be a great rivalry that we're finally going to see. My number 10, a little bit of a wild take right now, but I'm going with Arizona. I do feel surprisingly good about this team. They are replacing a lot of minutes, especially from Caleb Love's side of things, but also Clark Bryant. But there's a lot of space that's being pretty well used. Lorso is probably going to have a breakout season per se. He's just going to get a lot more minutes, so it's probably going to be doubling his points, if anything else. Freshman Koa Pete is probably going to be in that main ball handling role. And I think that in terms of how well they're going to play in the Big 12, that it probably will be similar. I don't think they're going to have that like slow start that they had last year, which really put them behind the eight ball. But they still managed to do pretty well, in honestly, my opinion. I didn't really think they were going to make the Sweet 16 or the tournament at all after that like 4-5 start, if anyone recalls. It is kind of a big push because there are still some holes in the lineup that I don't know if Lloyd can fully fill. The portal has pretty much provided a lot for them, on top of how well they've kept players as long as they're in the freshman incoming. They're incoming freshmen. Do I know if their ceiling's above an Elite Eight? Probably not. Like the way I'm kind of viewing it right now is that if they do make anything beyond that, it's probably too early to tell. But the upside here is good enough for me to put them in this top 10 as of right now, at least.
Yeah, I definitely hear you about the upside of Arizona. I definitely think their upside is great. I personally have them just outside my top 10. I view them more as a top 15 type of team. But at my number 10 spot, I have Texas Tech. And really, I originally probably go into this video or maybe a week or so ago, I had them a little bit higher than 10. But at this point, I definitely felt it was up in the air as to whether Darian Williams was going to, if he returned to school, come back to Texas Tech or not. At this point, I'm pretty sure he's adamant that he will not be returning to Texas Tech. And for that reason, I mean, I'm really giving them the benefit of the doubt of having a potential player of the year candidate in JT Top and coming back to school for them next year. But when you take him off this team, they're probably a bubble team, if I'm being honest with you. They'd have had some nice pickups in the portal between Luan Watts coming from Washington State, and Donovan Atwell coming over from UNC Greensboro. But I mean, outside of that, they've lost a lot. They've lost, of course, Darian Williams. They lost Kevin Overton. They're losing Federico. And again, I just worry they don't have a lot of shooting whatsoever. They're gonna put a lot on the plate of Donovan Atwell, which again kind of only averaged around 13, 14 at the mid-major level. Wasn't really a great playmaker. I just think they lack both shooting and playmaking in their backcourt this year. And how much can you really ask JT Toppin to do? I mean, I'm sure he will be in the running for a National Player of the Year, and I will be shocked if he won't be. But again, that's really you're kind of only dude on this team next year who's capable of doing that. And again, they've lost a lot, and you take JT Toppin off this team, then they're really not all that good, if I'm being honest with you. But again, that's a National Player of the Year that they have on the roster. It's tough to take them out of the top 10 because of that. And for right now, I still have them in my top 10.
Yeah, I will say, and we've mentioned this, and I mentioned this with the Louisville choice. I have Louisville, Texas Tech, and Michigan as like the honorable mentions for this list. I think Michigan's the big one to talk about right now because of the Yaxel decision. It is growingly likely that he's going to be drafted in the first rounds and will likely stay as a result, which is a very big blow and will probably take them out. If he does come back or he does come to Michigan, he will likely make Michigan a top 5 team, I would say, and possibly a front runner in the Big Ten against Purdue. That said, they do have great replacements in Ademar at the 5, but Yaxel is really supposed to be one of, if not the best transfer players to really arrive here, and it definitely would have changed Michigan a lot. I like what Kanaye said about Texas Tech. I'm not as convinced as I was maybe a few weeks ago, so that's why I'm bumping them down. And like I said before with Louisville, the Ali Khalifa decision is kind of weighing me down right now.